Welcome back, Uncanny people of the internet.
Bazinga!
We are continuing our journey through X-Men stories from Giant Size X-Men, and now we're at the point where Chris Claremont joins us.
I'm hungry. Oh, there's a star.
He's not a mutant, but his power is great character building. Until it isn't.
Congratulations, you played yourself.
Full disclosure, it takes a little bit after Giant Size X-Men to really get in the swing of things, and Uncanny X-Men 94 through 100 really illustrates this. Before we start, there are two things we're going to need to clear up about X-Men comics for the foreseeable future. One of those things being, X-Men comics tend to feel like soap dramas, and that's entirely by design. See, X-Men comics are on one hand mostly about showing a team that is under constant attack and surveillance from governments, organizations that are vastly funded, and artificial intelligence from the future? That couldn't be happier to see this minority group of people within the Marvel Universe be completely obliterated. While on the other hand, it's still about people in spandex capes with superpowers going around trying to beat up people. So yeah, keep trying to explain to X-Men fans that, teams like the Avengers and the Justice League have it tough. The other thing we need to talk about is that in X-Men comics for the foreseeable future, and specifically these 6 issues of X-Men, follow the Monster of the Week format, and if you don't know what that is, you have made the right choices in your life, at least up until this point. Basically, it's a type of singular issue within a series where an antagonist will be introduced and beaten in the same issue. Sometimes that antagonist will show up back again if they're popular, and sometimes not, like Axe here. Oh, what does Axe do, you ask? Well, he has an axe. That's it. You lose. Good day, sir. If you like X-Men comics and want more content like this, hit the subscribe button because there's a lot more to come. With all that out of the way, let's enter that danger room.
Welcome, Professor.
So this issue picks up almost immediately after the Krakoa mission, and wouldn't you know it, guess which one of these people quit? Yeah, it's the same guy who's been complaining nonstop virtually hours ago. Say it ain't so, Professor. Seriously, Sunfire sucks. Guy looks and talks like a fascist koi fish. Which isn't knocking koi fish. I love those little pond buddies. The shocking departure of Yoshira aside, it seems like the rest of the team Xavier assembled wants to say and see what Xavier can offer for them. However, the same can't be said about the previous X-Men team. Jean, Bobby, Warren, Lorna, and Alex have seemed to have had it with Xavier's erratic behavior. The only member willing to stay behind from the previous team is Scott. We see Scott escorting his previous teammates out of the X-Mansion. The last one to talk to him is Jean. At this point, Jean and Scott have been an item for quite a while now. Jean was hoping that this would be the jumping off point where she and Scott could finally start a life together, but as it turns out, Scott would rather stick around for his adoptive father.
He may have been your father, boy, but he wasn't your daddy.
And continue to be the leader for this new X-Men team. I wish I could say this was the first time Scott has been an absolute bastard to red-headed women who care about him, but then I'd be lying. Scott Summers shoots concussive blasts out of his face and is a terrible boyfriend, husband, and honestly even a terrible leader at times. After this new team's first session in the Danger Room, oh, see, that's cool because that's kind of my class right now. Please say that's cool. Thunderbird starts to argue with Cyclops after taking a laser to the knee.
He took an arrow in the knee.
They get into a heated argument like two widowed babies. And then Xavier's big dumb Wizard of Oz head comes in to break up the fight. We then cut to the inside of a giant mountain in Colorado, where the base of NORAD is located, I guess? Where a group of trained army personnel find a big red button that says "Press me," and then proceeds to press it. What the fuck? And then in drops, how do I put this? Dollar store animal people? Who are led by Count Nefaria. Now the question on everybody's mind is, who is Count Nefaria? Well, that's easy. You see, he was a part of an international Italian crime syndicate that failed at taking down the Avengers, got kicked out, and here he is trying to redeem himself with an army of animal people? Do I care enough to look more into him? Nope. Do you? Probably not. Will he probably appear on a Disney Plus show? Definitely. Anyway, Count Nefaria's big plan here is to hold NORAD hostage because of the Doomsmith system here. It's just basically a system that launches a bunch of nukes everywhere. We cut back to the X Mansion where we find Scott here wallowing in his own actions. Another thing Scott is famously known for, and then in walks Kurt. He notices Scott deep in thought and offers to lend an ear. Kurt, alongside with characters like Aurora and Piotr, act as moral centers of the X-Men, at least for most of the time. If I could characterize the current version of Kurt, it would be like the attentive little brother, who's a little bit of a playboy. Xavier then interrupts him and asks everybody to meet him in the briefing room. Xavier has a mission for them, given to him by Beast? You see, at this time, the smart big blue boy, Beast, was actually a part of the Avengers. In this issue, he quite literally pawns off this mission to the X-Men because the Avengers ain't got time for that shit. The X-Men then get in that big old jet they have lying around and head straight to the mountain to deal with this ex-Italian mobster. On the way over to the mountain, Count Nefaria realizes it's not the Avengers who are coming after him, but the X-Men. Turns out he's actually really overjoyed because, on top of losing to the Avengers, he also lost to a previous version of the X-Men team. Before the X-Men can make it to the mountain, Count Nefaria realizes he has his fancy disruptor beam and shoots it at the jet. The issue then ends with the X-Men falling out of the sky. In this issue, titled War Hunt, which kinda just sounds like an issue name for the Punisher instead, promises that an X-Men will die, and in return, you will not care who does. Or maybe you will. Let's find out, shall we? While the X-Men are rapidly falling through the sky, Cyclops has time to calmly issue commands to deal with gravity and the fatal effects on their bodies. Nightcrawler briefly flexes his physics knowledge as to why that's not gonna work out, Chief, and Storm is kind of in the background, just like, dude, you know I can fly, right? Banshee can also kind of fly. Well, it's more like screaming at the ground and the force of his scream pushes him. You know what, never mind. So Storm grabs Nightcrawler and Wolverine, Banshee grabs Cyclops and Thunderbird. Meanwhile, Colossus just falls. He just falls. Because you see, he's made out of metal, and metal is stronger than ground, a concept which I learned through Pokemon. They make a plan to get inside of the mountain. Cyclops uses his galaxy brain and then tells Nightcrawler to teleport inside of the base to do some reconnaissance, without ever having any thought to what might happen once he gets inside. What happens when he gets inside of the base? He gets jumped by the animal people. So Nightcrawler begins to fight half Kermit, half man over here and gets his ass kicked because other than being slightly bigger than Nightcrawler,
I'm a hard hitter, man,
and green, he's more or less just a guy. What follows next is a series of fights between various X-Men and various animal people. I would say the one noteworthy match between all these animal people is the one between this Catman versus Wolverine. You see, this Catman has Wolverine pinned, and Wolverine, again, is a short Canadian man with indestructible knives for hands, and before Wolverine has a chance to kill that Catman, Colossus actually steps in and knocks that Catman out. This simple intervention goes to illustrate two things about Colossus. The first is that Colossus, in any given situation, would much rather avoid bloodshed. And two is that Colossus is incredibly protective of his team members. Shortly after the Ani-Men are defeated, the Ani-Men? It sounds like a bad podcast where people review anime. So yeah, Count Nefaria just realizes he's a regular guy and figures his only way out is to initiate the self-destruct sequence on the Doomsmith. While Count Nefaria is preparing to exit on the jet, Banshee and Thunderbird are just waking up from getting their asses kicked by the Ani-Men. Both of them manage to grab hold of the jet as it's taking off. Hey, remember earlier in the issue where it mentions one of the X-Men would die? Can you guess which one it is? While Thunderbird is on top of the jet trying not to die, the rest of the X-Men are trying to stop the Doomsmith sequence from going off. At least up until Xavier tells Cyclops he already took care of it and to get outside before Thunderbird commits ritual suicide. Thunderbird starts spitting out lines about how he's been a loner and outcast his entire life, so he's gonna prove it by killing himself. As the jet plane blows up, we see this strangely beautiful panel of the plane blowing up above Xavier's head. As we see the wreckage of the jet plane going up in flames, We see Xavier, a noted telepath, probably felt the last moments of Thunderbird's death, his pain, his anguish, and maybe his acceptance of the situation happening to him. In the last few panels of this issue, Cyclops drops some truth saying that death in their line of work is almost an inevitability. It's both hauntingly accurate and a line that would stick. Because in my opinion, there are only really two ways you left the mansion as an X-Man, either through a body bag or moving on to something else. We follow up right after the death of Thunderbird. Rest in peace, you bull wrestling, long-haired angry man. And it seems Scott has set up some sort of pillar with the face of Thunderbird on it. We see Scott alone and in mourning, and also going through some self-evaluation on his failure as a leader, letting Thunderbird die. Shortly after, we're introduced to some sort of housekeeper that Xavier mentions, who is coming over soon. This housekeeper happens to be Moira McTaggart, a highly accomplished scientist who lives on Muir Island. And after we're introduced to Moira, we're then introduced to Stephen Lang. Stephen Lang is basically a proponent for mutant genocide, like a lot of X-Men enemies. He was basically a hardcore simp for Bolivar Trask. Bolivar Trask being the guy who set up the Sentinel program. You know, those big purple robots that commit genocide. He tries to sell his colonel friend that has come over to visit the base on Project Armageddon, but he's not buying it. So instead we cut back to the mansion and just surprise demon. It's just a big pink demon with one eye and horns. Look, I told you X-Men comics were silly. I don't know why you're looking at me for. To save you guys a lot of time, we'll just boil down this fight into one big montage and some trippy artwork. No! The most important part of this comic is actually all the way at the end, when Storm figures out how to defeat King of the Dead. When Storm finally blows up the MacGuffin that destroys the demon, we see that she remembers a specific instance of her childhood where she was actually buried alive under debris. The sheer panic at the thought of being buried alive again forces Storm to put out an absurd amount of power. If you haven't guessed it already, Storm is actually a major claustrophobic, and is something that would go on to haunt her for a while. I love that despite how powerful of a mutant Storm is, this phobia from her past is something that she is still dealing with, and could be relatable to many true believers out there. I know that these issues have been pretty silly so far, but in these silly comics, there are concentrated nuggets of nuanced character development, brought to you by Papa Chris. Anyway, this issue ends with the pink demon becoming a pink fart cloud, and the death of the colonel who met with Lang, who's gonna report him for being a psycho. Wonder who could have done that. Issue 97 opens up with a bad dream Xavier is having about a big space battle that could be important later. For now, we're gonna jump to Alex Summers and Lorna Dane just chilling, trying to have a normal quiet life outside of the X-Men shenanigans. After Havoc leaves in his Crocodile Dundee outfit to go hunting,
That's not a knife.
Polaris hears a knock on the door and is immediately shot by something? After Alex hears her screams, he books it back to the house and finds Lorna Dane, who has now shifted personalities subsequent of being shot by the mystery beam. She now calls herself the Mistress of Magnetism. There is an S&M joke in there, but I'm not gonna make it. And then she proceeds to knock out Alex. We cut to our mutant friends dropping off Professor X at the airport, and Nightcrawler flexing on them with a little device that makes him look human, made by yours truly, Tony
Stark was able to build this in a cave! With a box of scraps!
Well, I'm sorry. I'm not Tony Stark.
Alex and Lorna show up in their new, purple disco villain outfit. She shoots Jean with the same mystery beam they were shot by.
Oh no!
After seeing this, Colossus and Nightcrawler break into their costumes and try to take down Alex before he has a chance to blow up Xavier's plane. We are also revealed to who is the mastermind behind Havoc and Polaris' brainwashing. It's Eric the Red. So this part is really weird. You see, Eric the Red was once an alias Cyclops used to infiltrate an enemy's headquarters. But this Eric the Red is an entirely different character. I really wish I could say this is the last time the X-Men have two different characters who shared the same name, costume, and body, but I'd make myself, and by extension everybody else who listens to this, a liar. From here, a couple of fights break out between the mutants and Eric the Red. I would say throughout this fight, two notable moments happen. First happens when an airplane falls on Colossus. We have a moment where Nightcrawler is genuinely concerned and almost swears death upon whoever did this, but then But it's fine, because Colossus's will is stronger than... Steel? Huh? Huh? The second moment comes from Storm and Polaris fighting in the air, at which point Polaris provokes Storm, and then she claps back by going absolute Super Saiyan mode on her.
Even further beyond!
Seeing how bad the situation is, Alex, Lorna, and Eric all escape. We follow up with Scott Summers being yelled at by wait. Where the hell was Short Stuff in this entire fight?
Hey pal, you just blowing from Stupid Town?
The last panel of this issue is Stephen Lang, who seems to be building to something.
Professor.
So that's it for issues 94 to 97. If these issues feel all over the place, you have to understand that these are still the baby forms of characters that have yet to feel their place in the Marvel Universe. But as these comics continue, these characters grow and their bonds begin to form between people that went from strangers to a highly organized team in a very short period of time. Not to mention how death and sacrifice in X-Men comics affect characters, and happen more often than you might think. In fact, we will see that in issues 98 through 100, another X-Men member will have to sacrifice their life. So place your bets as to who it is. Don't spoil it if you know who it is. As always, I hope you survived this video.